So the Agatha All Along season finale aired last night, and it blew any expectations that I had right out of the water, and I loved it so much. But now left wondering what comes next, because there has to be something that comes next. And that's kind of what I want to talk about in my breakdown today. So, let's dive right into the episodes and discuss. So I think right off the bat, the way that I want to frame this is there's really two main goals I feel when it comes to Agatha All Along. Number one is to introduce Wiccan into the MCU, and number two is to really dive deeper and try to unravel the mystery that is Agatha Harkness. And I think that in both of those objectives, the show wildly succeeded. But first, let's talk about Wiccan. Oh my goodness, Joe Locked, incredible. Like, in my wildest dreams, I could not imagine such a perfect comics accurate version of Wiccan. I think he looked amazing in that costume when he came down and he was wearing the full Wiccan outfit. My mouth was agape. My mouth was fully agape throughout that entire scene, just because it also looks so good. We saw teases of this earlier on in the season with the crown, and it looked fine. It looked good. But I think there was something that just it was like that reveal of Scarlet Witch's costume at the end of WandaVision. Like, that's how good it was. And whoever is the costumer for this series and for WandaVision deserves a raise and a kiss on the mouth and just a Nobel Peace Prize, because they do such a great job at tailoring these costumes in a way that it's both comics accurate but also goes very well with the show, with the actors, and I just loved it. But we got to talk about that twist where we find out that the Road never actually existed and it was all Wiccan. It was all Billy Maximoff's magic doing all of this. I think that it's hilarious in hindsight to think earlier in the episodes, Agatha's like, oh, I knew you were a Maximoff because you and your mom have the same tail. And it's like, what is that tell? It's creating a new reality, distorting reality. Like, that is a pretty obvious tell. And so I thought that in hindsight is just an amazing touch. I do think that the way that that twist was revealed, where he was going through his room and he realizes so many of those things were in common with what the Road that they had just experienced. I think that it really shows just the magnitude of Wiccan's powers as it should be. And the fact that he's not in control of them for a large part of it. And that is a big thing for Wiccan in the comic books. It kind of is the undertone for a lot of his relationships, especially his relationship with Teddy, aka Hulkling. There's a lot of back and forth of, does Hulkling actually care about Wiccan? Does he love him? Or is this something that Wiccan is conjuring that he's making him do? And that kind of ambiguity and uncertainty is something that is such a staple with this character that it's amazing to see it develop in the MCU. And I do think we do learn a lot about the extent of Wiccan's powers, because we learn the fact that Death can't just take Wiccan, because if she kills him, then he can reincarnate into another body and Death will have to try and look for him again. And I think that's a really interesting kind of twist that I don't believe was in the comics, that he can kind of just reincarnate and can reincarnate other people. That's going to be big going forward. I mean, it was big in this episode when he reincarnated Tommy into the body of that boy who was about to die. I mean, there's no way that this doesn't have other consequences going forward. He's cheated Death once, he's cheated Death again, for Tommy this time. It was a beautiful moment when he was finding that body for Tommy and he asked Agatha, am I killing this boy so that Tommy can live? But he's gone before she can answer, and she looks at the locket that has Nicholas Scratch's hair in it, and she just goes, sometimes boys just die. And that is such a sad truth, but things happen in life. Life is unexpected. I think this is her way of beginning to understand what happened to Nicholas, beginning to accept the fact that, the time that they were given by Death was such a gift, but sometimes people just die. Sometimes people just leave you, and it hurts so much. And being a witch where your own life is so prolonged makes it harder and makes it more difficult to create those attachments. But again, it doesn't make it any less rewarding, which I just think it's so beautiful and kind of touches on that other big objective of the show, which is to kind of peel back the layers of Agatha. So I think it's fair to say that my fears of Agatha dying were warranted, sort of. So she does come back as a ghost, which I didn't see that coming, but I kind of loved it. But yeah, the last 2 episodes were quite the journey for Agatha. Her and Death come head to head. Death really wants to take Wiccan, but he has to kind of go voluntarily. Agatha makes a deal with her. And that, oh my God, that just broke my heart when she was like, I'll give you the boy, but you and I are done. Like, I don't want to ever see you. And when I die in a really, really long time, I don't want it to be your face that I see. Like, you could see Rio's heart break, and Aubrey Plaza does such an amazing job playing that yearning and that wanting, and like she loves Agatha, but also she's so hurt by Agatha not wanting her anymore that she takes that rejection and just like turns it into anger towards her. And then there's that final epic battle with them, where she's like death by 1,000 cuts, and then like she cuts Agatha. And I just think that that's something so interesting, because they clearly had a love that was so powerful, because these are not women who can easily find attachment, who can easily create bonds with other people, with other women. So the fact that there was something there with each other, and that is now broken and can potentially never be brought back, I hope they can make it work. That was just such an interesting it's an interesting exploration, but it's also done in a very interesting way. And I think I know that some people might be disappointed that we didn't quite see how they created this such unique bond, but I'm kind of glad at it, because I think that the imagination conjures up so much more that would be very hard to portray in a way that's sufficiently satisfying. And so I think that when it's left up to the imagination, we can create a lot, we can fill in those gaps, and put a lot of our own emotions and a lot of our own baggage, a lot of our own experiences into these two people's relationship, and that makes it so powerful. And I don't think that that's an accident by the writers. And side note, I definitely do think that Jac Shaeffer and company can create an origin for their love story that is satisfying, that is emotionally resonant. But I also don't think they have to, and I think that they chose not to. And that's a beautiful choice, and that is a wonderful choice. And this show is just full of wonderful, beautiful choices that once you step back from it a little bit more, it unravels so much more than could ever actually be said. So love that show for that reason. We do see, however, how their relationship ended with the scenes involving Nicholas Scratch. So he actually was not supposed to be born, really. He was destined to die from the beginning, but Death, loving Agatha so much, Agatha begging her for mercy, saying her, my love, don't do this. Death couldn't do anything to stop his death, but she could delay it a little bit. So she said she was going to give her time. She gave her 6 years with her wonderful boy, where they developed such an interesting dynamic, because she clearly loved her son, but she was also killing witches throughout the time and using him as bait to lure more witches. And we find out that the Ballad of the Witch's Road was actually a song that Nicholas started to sing about the path they were walking on. And then that grew. They created this song together. And I think that it's very interesting later on when Agatha says that the ballad was meaningless and meant nothing. We obviously know that's not true, because it is the thing that she created with her son. And that's a very powerful magic in and of itself. But also, once he did die in that death scene, oh my gosh, I was crying, because he died at night while Agatha was holding him. And then Rio just kind of, you can tell Rio cared about Agatha by the way she handled her son, because it was so delicate, it was so gentle. And before he comes to her, he tells her to give his mom a kiss, and he kisses Agatha on the cheek, and it's just so gentle and so beautiful. Death takes him, and Agatha buries the body, and with that body, she buries so much of her soul, so much of any sense of empathy that she may have had is buried with her son. And so she uses that. Another witch comes and she's like, "Have you heard of the Witch's Road? I know you know it. Can you help me?" And she uses that song that she created so lovingly with her son to lure witches to their deaths. And that's how we get the history, the backstory of the Ballad of the Witch's Road. The Witch's Road was never real. It was never real until Billy Maximoff made it real. And I think the fact that she twisted something that was so precious, and that was born of such innocence, into a way to trap unsuspecting witches, it breaks your heart, because that twisted nature is what happened to Agatha. The twist and the manifestation of turning the song into something evil, something mythical, something dangerous, is a representation of what happened to Agatha after her son died. After Rio had to take her son away. It was never clear why Rio had to do this. I know she's Death, but I would want some more exploration as to, like, who is she Death for? Like, what happens if she doesn't follow the rules? Because clearly she has given Agatha special treatment. And it's just, the dynamics are really interesting. And Rio mentions that it's to preserve the balance, which it's some rhetoric that we've heard before from a certain very big purple villain in the MCU. And so it kind of makes you aware of that connection. But it also makes you wonder, like, what was Rio's reaction to the snap and then to the unsnapping? It is so beautiful that after so many centuries of being alone, after trying to forget about what happened to her son, in comes Billy Maximoff, and he reminds him so much of her son, because he also doesn't like the fact that she's killing witches. He doesn't think that she is bad. There's so much that he has hopes for her. And like, it's something that she can't really see for herself. She can't see herself being better, but Nicholas and Billy both see a good version of her hidden somewhere in that. In the end, in that scene where Rio's like, it's either him or you, and they're kind of going back and forth. Agatha's like, it should be me, and then Wiccan's like, no, it should be me, and then Agatha's like, okay. She kind of reverts back to herself, but then they have that conversation telepathically where Billy mentions, is this what happened to Nikki? And in Agatha's mind, this is very different than what happened to Nikki, because with what happened to Nikki died while she was asleep, while she couldn't beg for any more time to Death for. She couldn't make that bargain to trade herself for her son, which I'm sure is something that Agatha would have done at the time, but she wasn't given that choice. So now she's given the chance to save her new kind of surrogate son, and it's so beautiful that she takes it. And honestly, gay people can never just break up normally. It's like, what do you mean you're giving me the actual literal kiss of death? Like, but it was so beautiful. Really just such a special moment, and I think probably one of the most epic kisses in the MCU. And yeah, so now we have Billy, who is kind of growing way more into his power, and we have Agatha alongside him as a ghost, which I kind of like the gray hair, but there is something off about the look. It's a little fierce, but it's also could be more fierce, like, especially because we've seen like different versions of Agatha as a ghost. We've also seen different versions of Agatha in the comics, like with the gray streak that I think Catherine Hahn would have totally rocked. And it is kind of a weird choice to kind of go with a more like witchy look, as opposed to like a more glammed up, fierce, fabulous version that we've seen throughout this entire show. So we know Catherine Hahn can definitely pull it off. We know the costume department can definitely pull it off. So I'm hoping that they tweak her look a little bit, keep part of the gray, but maybe make some of the alterations to like the outfit. And I also think that's like, while I like the idea of her being a ghost, because it does reflect some of the things that happen in the comic books, it's also going to be a lot more expensive for Catherine Hahn to show up now, which makes me a little disappointed that the MCU might not shell up the money. I think they should. I mean, they're paying RDJ $90 million, which is roughly the budget of 2 seasons of this show. I mean, if I had to pick between one of those two, I think you can tell which one I would rather pick. But yeah, they can definitely afford it, and I hope they do, because what comes next, this show kind of ends on a little bit of a cliffhanger with Death being subdued for the moment, but also Billy and Agatha are on the road. Again, not the witch's road, but just on the road to find Tommy, who is being reincarnated and who's alone in the world because the person that he was reincarnated into was also alone, was being bullied, was being harassed. That's how he died. And so I just imagine the dynamics that must come from feeling so alone and now being in a different body, that you might not be aware that you're in a different body. Like Billy wasn't aware when the switch happened. He really believed he was Billy Kaplan. And so imagine going through that alone, and especially because you're not the one who did it this time. That dynamic is going to be so interesting. I can't wait for Billy to meet Tommy, for them to come together, but also maybe they don't come together. Maybe Tommy can't understand why he was brought back. Maybe he rejects it a little bit. That could be very interesting. Also, kind of to go back to some of the loose threats that happened throughout the show, most of the Coven unfortunately passed away, but I do think that most of them had very honorable deaths. Lilia, we saw last week, full circle moment, loved her moment. Alice was killed by Agatha, but she was also killed protecting her Coven, which is something that's like the job of a protection witch. So it kind of made you feel a little bit better, but it still didn't mean it hurt any less seeing her die. Mrs. Sharon Davis, R.I.P. Both her and her husband have now been killed by Maximoffs, which is interesting choice, but you know what, you can't really think about it too much, because he didn't really mean it, obviously, which is not an excuse, but it's kind of where the show's leading to, is like he wants to gain control of his ability so that doesn't happen again. He memorializes their deaths, their lives, with that stone, the gravestone that he makes. But Jen is able to survive, and as Agatha mentions, you actually saved a life, because she was planning on killing them all, because the song wasn't real. The song was all fake. It was just a way to lure witches in. She's been doing it for a year. She's been doing the exact same routine, which, I mean, I think she should get new material. But anyway, she makes the songs, makes them sing the song, makes them react negatively so that they attack her. She steals their power. That didn't happen this time. Instead, the door opened, and that's how she found out that Wiccan was Billy Maximoff, was Billy Kaplan, was Billy the teenager, right? So yeah, Jen is unbound, though, which is very exciting. She finds out it was Agatha all along who was the person who bound her for money, because apparently that's something that happened throughout the histories, and I think it's a very interesting touch. She's able to unbound herself, and she has such beautiful pink energy powers. And she crawls her way out of the ground. She's in Westview. She leaves. She does the signature flying off MCU thing, where it's like you lift with one foot, propelled by your powers. Beautiful look. So I'm really excited for her journey, because how do you have someone who's a powerful witch and not do anything else with it? You just don't. But yeah, the big question that I'm sure everyone's wondering is, where the hell is Wanda, and when is she going to show up? Now, both of her boys are alive and well. Vision is also alive somewhere. Next chapter of this saga would be probably, I don't know if it's still called Vision Quest, but the Vision TV show. I am a little bit worried that it's not showrun by Jac Shaeffer, because Jac Shaeffer has really become the steward of Wanda Maximoff's story in her corner of the MCU, and I really want to see her continue the story. Hopefully she gets to write and possibly direct the solo Wanda movie. I think that would be great if that ever happens. But when Wanda returns, will she do it by herself? Will Billy be the one to bring her back, since we know he can reincarnate people? Also, I wouldn't want them to reincarnate her in any other body. It has to be Elizabeth Olsen, or I think everyone's going to be disappointed. But I do think that there's a clear kind of pathway from this show doing the Children's Crusade storyline. Once he finds Billy, once he meets up with the other Young Avengers, which I'm sure he will soon, I can really see that being part of the storyline. Maybe it's a subplot of one of the big Avengers movies. I think it can support its own movie. But again, dance card of the MCU is so full. When will this happen? I honestly, I don't have the answer for that. If it was up to me, I would greenlight it immediately, film it immediately, release it immediately. Obviously, it's not up to me. That being said, I am very interested to see what Wanda has to say about Agatha and Billy joining forces and becoming a team and really becoming really close with each other, because Agatha and Wanda have some beef. And also, if Nicholas Scratch ever comes back, which I'm hoping he does because he's kind of a big deal in the comics, what is he going to say about his mom finding a replacement for him, essentially? Very interesting, very dramatic, and all of the things that I think Jac Shaeffer is very aware of and is leading to that. So in this last minute or so, I want to give just a huge shout out to Jac Shaeffer and her writing team and all the directors who came on this project, because they all did an amazing job handling the story with care. You can clearly tell that they're all growing in their craft, their witchcraft, but they're all growing from WandaVision to Agatha All Along, which is essentially, it maintains all of the good elements from that, but all of the elements that were lacking in WandaVision, it is aware of them now, and it's grown from them, and it's created a series that is so beautiful, emotionally resonant, magical, powerful, that can lead to so many more ramifications within the MCU, and I absolutely loved it. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the season finale of Agatha All Along. So what do you think? Was it everything that you had in mind? Was it more? I would love to hear your thoughts on this show, on the MCU overall, on the trajectory that they're setting these characters for. Yeah, I just kind of want to fangirl with you all, because it has been really an interesting journey, and kind of following a show in this format has been really new for me, but it's also been really a good way to connect with other people who are so passionate about television, about the MCU, about just entertainment in general, which has been really great. And yeah, we did it. We reached the end of the Witch's Road, and I think we were very well rewarded. But what do you think? Leave a comment down below and let me know.